Hello, welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to be talking about this book, Brick Dust, by Craig Jordan Baker. Not Neil Jordan. I keep getting him in my head. I just keep getting mixed up with Neil Jordan, who is the great actor from, I believe, was he in The Crying Game, I think? I think that's who I'm thinking of. But anyway, I will try not to say Neil. I will try to keep to the correct name. So I was very nervous. I was excited and nervous about reading this book in equal measure, I would say. So I didn't actually realise that there was a follow-up to this book until quite recently. So this came out, this came out last year, Brick Dust. So it's been out a while, it's been out a year. And I had already read this years and years and years ago. What year was the Nakulians, actually? I think it's a pretty long time ago now this came out. Let's just find you a date. Oh, I didn't realise that's actually signed. I've forgotten that I'd got that signed. Yeah, this was 2020. It looks like written in 2019. It came out in 2020. So it's not that long, actually. As I thought it was maybe longer ago than that. But anyway, it is a follow-up to this. And because I loved this so much, as you will know if you go back to I think it was in my Irish fiction video that I talked about this one and how much I loved this. So yeah, I was a bit nervous about this in case it kind of didn't live up to my expectations, kind of thing. But I was excited about reading it because I did really love the Nakulians. And it did, by the way, it did live up to my expectations, and it is a great book. It's a fair bit smaller, I would say. It's quite a shortish novel. I think it took me about 3 days, to read, 3 or 4 days. So let's start with the narrator, right? So it has an unreliable narrator, as does this. And I think it's the same narrator, but it might not be, because it is a while since I read this. But it's certainly the same voice, but then I guess that is Craig Jordan Baker, isn't it? And I guess when you do that unreliable narrator thing, that first person narrator thing, I think a lot of you goes into it. So, maybe that's just me picking up on, the voice and it being Craig Jordan Baker's voice rather than it being the exact same narrator. I don't know, but I felt like it was the same narrator, but we just learn more about him in this one eventually, not straight away. So it is kind of who he is and what his actual relationship with the Nakulian family and the other families that come into this in here, because it's not just one family of the Nakulians anymore. When you get to this one, there's some other families that get interwoven in there, as there is in any family's history, isn't there, if you go back far enough, or if you're being real and honest. So the narrator, you learn a ways in, I would say, into the book, like what his relationship is with the story of the Nakulians and these other families that they get kind of interwoven with. And it's really quite I'll tell you, right? So there is going to be some spoilers in this video, right? And when it's a really, really explicit thing, if somebody dies or something like that, I'll tell you straight before, but I am going to do some spoilers, right? So the guy is an archivist, or a kind of unofficial archivist. It's not his job or anything like that, but he's a hoarder. But, if you want to be polite about him, you'll say he's an archivist. But, if you want to be, kind of brutal about it, and the way that he is perceived very much by, the other characters is that he's a hoarder. And so he has accumulated a massive wealth of stuff, including like newspapers and all these documents that and a lot of them pertain to, this family, the Nakulian family. You need to have read this one first to read. Well, I'm going to say no, right? Because I don't have once I've read a book, I read that many books, and my memory's not like, I don't have a photographic memory or anything like that. So I remembered loving this book, and I remembered vaguely kind of, it being about this Nakulian family, but I vaguely remembered certain of the characters, but like their brickies and things like that. But I didn't remember it very well at all, and I still managed to get through this fine, without having I didn't go back and read this again or anything like that. However, I did read a review, and that reviewer was saying that because she hadn't read this one and she felt that it was a disadvantage, and she found all of the characters find it a bit confusing kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know. It's up to you. So the other thing to say about this book is, like, don't come expecting all the answers, right? If you're the kind of reader that you want things spelling out for you, and you want like neat resolutions, and you want to know exactly what happens to every single character, and you don't like ambiguity or anything like that, this probably isn't the book for you, quite honestly. But if you're like me and you like something that is quite like, you know, metafiction, or that's quite postmodern, and you're okay with some ambiguity, then, you know, then you may well, you know, like I did, you may love it, right? So that's another thing, is just to say, is, yeah, there are lots of kind of loose ends that don't get tied up. But the thing with this book is, that kind of is the point. So the narrator, who is this, you know, this hoarder, as we've said, this archivist, part of the point of the book is, it's not just about what he does have and the information that he does have. It's the fact that you can have one document and it can tell you one thing about somebody, but there's so much that you don't know as well, isn't there? That, you know, no single document can give you kind of, you know, all the facts, all the information, and you know, and fill in all of that, all of those, you know, mysteries and things that human life is full of. So yeah, don't come expecting all the answers. Ambiguity is kind of part of the point. My favourite things about this book then. So number one favourite thing, the female characters. This is something, and I don't remember this particular being a big thing in the Niculians, but I like I said, I don't remember it that well. But yeah, the female characters are just so well drawn in this book, you know, especially to say, you know, that it's a male writer that's written it. Although I don't really hold with all that stuff about, you know, that you've got to write only from your own, you know, experience kind of thing. You know, every man is going to know lots and lots and lots of women, and I think that does qualify you to write, you know, female characters. So two in particular that stood out for me, right, and there is going to be a spoiler here, Betty. The character of Betty is now one of my favourite characters of all time, and I just absolutely fell in love with Betty. And Craig, you have really broken my heart by, she gets killed off, and it really did upset me. It really did upset me. She has a very, very sad story. And I'll tell you what, it kind of, like, in terms of the impact that this had on me, right? When I watched Walking Dead, I loved the character of Glenn. And if you know Walking Dead at all, you'll know that Glenn, they killed him off numerous times, and then he kind of came back from, you know, it was all a dream, or, you know, whatever ridiculous scenarios and things. But then obviously there was a point where he was dead, and he really was dead. And that was the point where I had to stop watching, because I just couldn't take another Glenn death. It just finished me off completely. And this felt as impactful as that. You know, this is just me and my autistic brain. I form attachments to fictional characters, and I get really upset if something terrible happens to them. And yeah, so Betty does get killed off, and I was very, very, very sad. I would like to pay homage to Betty a little bit. So I'm just going to read you a little bit of Betty. So she's a very funny character. She's a very clever, very intelligent character. Betty is very bookish, and I think that's why I like her so much. And she spends a lot of time in the library. She racks up a lot of library fines because she keeps some of the books and does various things with them. So this is Betty describing reading The Count of Monte Cristo. So in keeping with her literary sensibilities, Betty Niculian was one of those people who inhaled books, the kind of person who make even bookish people feel inadequate. It was 11:30 a.m, nearly lunchtime, and already she was 115 pages into Dumas' novelistic slab of adventure and intrigue. Already she had decided that the jewels and the money and the carriage clashes were part of a deadeningly predictable formula. For example, it seemed to Betty that whenever anyone did anything in The Count of Monte Cristo, they'd turn pale. People were turning pale over anything and everything. Being embarrassed would turn you pale, but a good meal would turn you pale too. Being executed in front of a baying crowd in Rome would turn you pale. But so could sitting down on a chair And it goes on, and they call her the pale one. That's how they refer to Betty. So I absolutely loved her character, and that bit is very funny. But there also is a really moving, very, very moving thing that happens to Betty as well. Her chapter is quite short. I wanted more. Craig, just give us a whole book on Betty. That would be amazing. That would be absolutely amazing. I would love that. There was Betty, and I loved Betty. She was my favourite character, hands down. But then also another character called Shauna, who I was very, very fond of. And so I'm going to read you a little bit of Shauna. I should have done this chronologically, shouldn't I? Shauna actually comes before Betty, but anyway, never mind. I'm going to page 28 on this. Right, so Shauna is, I think she's married to Frank, or at least they're together anyway. She lives with Frank, and they are an item. And you get the sense that she's sort of, Margaret Thatcher is kind of her role model, and you get the sense she would rather be maybe a power woman or a career woman or something like that, but she's just settled for this quite mundane life with Frank, and you get the sense she's quite bored, but also you get the sense that she really, really does love him as well. So I'll do you a little reading. So Shauna has this kind of ritual that she goes through when Frank isn't there, and that is that she undresses and she stands in front of the mirror and she sort of just like looks at herself. And this is how she describes that, and I just think this is so bloody well written. This, though, had proved difficult. She found that without Frank there, she didn't quite know how to undress, didn't quite know how to look at her nude form. She could take her clothes off, yes, but this was not undressing. And she could be naked, yes, but this was not being nude. These realizations disgusted her and frightened her. And so she created the fiction that she was not the one undressing or being nude, but she was the woman inside the mirror looking out at the woman who was undressing and being nude. And she copied those movements as any reflection must. And it goes on, right? It's just honestly such good writing, such absolutely mind-blowingly good writing, absolutely. And it's really moving, really, really, really moving. And this is one of the things I love about this book, right, is, it does that tragicomic thing that is so difficult to pull off. And it does have, it has that fine balance between, it is genuinely humorous. There's some quite, dark humour in there, but quite a lot of dark humour in there. But also you have these moments of tenderness, really touching moments, really poignant moments. And it does end with a kind of tragedy. And before I move on, Shauna's husband or partner, Frank, in their chapter, it does keep foreshadowing and saying that, there's this carbon monoxide leak in their house. And so you keep getting this foreshadowing, and we keep being told that, at some point Frank is going to, that will be how he meets his death, he'll die of carbon monoxide poisoning. And that, tell you what that reminded me of. It reminded me of Kate Atkinson. I think it's behind the scenes in the museum, where, is it Ruby? One of the characters keeps foreshadowing somebody else's death, or even maybe her own death. It might even be her own death, I think. So that really reminded me of that. And before I move on, let me say this, right? And this will tell you how in such high esteem I hold this book, and I hold Craig Jordan Baker as a writer. The character of Betty, I'll tell you who she reminded me of, is Ada in the Poisonwood Bible. So if you've never read the Poisonwood Bible, honestly, you've got to go and read that book. It's absolutely amazing. It's one of the best books I've ever read. And yeah, so there's this character called Ada, and she's like an elective mute, but she's super, super, super clever. And she has a very distinctive way of communicating, which she does are they called palindromes? I think they're called, aren't they? Those words that are the same backwards and forwards. Like, she communicates in palindromes. And Betty reminded me of that character. That's how good this book is, right? I do not throw around comparisons like that lightly. Barbara Kingsolver, Kate Atkinson, right? Right. So, okay. The other thing that I love while we're on the topic of, female characters or the female perspective, right? So one of the archive documents, I think it's the third archive document in here, I think, is an excerpt from the Every Woman's Guide to Acronyms. I mean, what a random thing. I went and Googled this because I thought, is this a real thing? I used to teach, media studies, and I used to teach Woman's Realm magazine from the 1960s. And it just sounds like the kind of thing they would have done in there. So, and it reminded me of, like, you know, that The Good Wife's Guide from the 1950s. It reminded me of that a little bit, although it is a bit more kind of, she's more feminist than that, the kind of the editor or whoever's written it. But I've got to read you a bit of it because it's really, really funny. Actually, document 2, I think I said document 3, didn't I? It's actually document 2 or archive 2. I'll just read you a little bit, right? So, hello there, faithful readers. So it does sound like it comes out of some, you know, trashy women's magazine or something. Have you ever been hosting a perfectly pleasant dinner party with a few of your closest friends when someone, always one of the husbands, makes a comment about the GDP of France or the GNER new line or the ABV of this Rihaja compared with that Merlot? And then she goes on to explain what lots and lots of different acronyms mean for the benefit of these, you know, ignorant wives who have business husbands or whatever. And I'll just tell you one of her things. So for AGM, this is the first entry is AGM. It's an annual general meeting. This happens in large companies where shareholders and board members meet once a year to discuss and vote on important matters concerning the company's future. My husband is in business and loves his weekends away at his AGM. Sometimes, though, there's a crisis in the business world, and then a hastily organised extraordinary general meeting, or EGM, will be called. My husband is always being called away to EGMs in the evening, and you get the sense that she knows full well that's not actually what he's gone to. So I just love, it's really, really funny. But it kind of has a function as well, because some of these acronyms appear like within the book. So it's almost as if he's kind of going, look, I know these are going to maybe throw some people off. Lots of people really don't like acronyms. So I'm giving you the information beforehand so that when you get to one of the acronyms, you can always look back and find it if you need to. It's kind of like he's done that a little bit. There is an AGM later on, which is the minutes. So one of the, I think, the next to last archived document that we get in the book is the minutes from the Titanic Morris dancers AGM meeting. So you know, it kind of does have a place in the actual, you know, kind of narrative, but it is very, very funny. So before I go, I'm going to leave you with I'm going to show you this. So this is something that I made actually after I'd read the book, right? These are my notes. I don't take notes on books very often nowadays. I'm not a student anymore. But I think you can tell, right, that this book has been written by, he's a bit of a boffin, I think, Craig Jordan Baker. I hope he doesn't mind me saying that. But he teaches in a university, you know, I think he is I think he's got a PhD. You've got to be pretty bloody brainy to pull off a structure like this, right? It is kind of a Godic fiction, this is, right? Because it's got these other documents that are interwoven and that kind of form the structure of the book. So it is structured around these archived documents. And to be honest, it took me a bit to twig what was going on with these archived documents. I did spend a few chapters kind of going, it's a head scratcher. This book is a proper head scratcher. But I like that. I like a book that challenges me. I like a book that I've got to really think about and that makes me think, right? So that's part of what enjoyed me. And it is a bit of a puzzle, right? So, but what I'm going to do now is, right, so when I got to the end of this book, I went back and I looked at all of the archives in order. And I think by doing that, I think if you have that at the beginning, it would make it much easier reading as you go through it. So if you want the process of reading to be a little bit easier, if you're not that much of a fan of a head scratcher, as much as I am, I'm going to share with you now, my notes that I made. And I don't think I've ever done. I mean, it's borderline spreadsheet, that is, isn't it? I've even color coded it. I mean, I don't do spreadsheets. I think I have some form of like data blindness. I look at a spreadsheet, I just feel ill. But yeah, I did. When I got to the end, I did have to go back and work my way through these archives to try and piece things together. And I think if I would have been maybe doing that as I went along, then it might have made it easier to read, kind of thing. Not that. So what I've done is, look, you've got like the document number. So there are 9 in all. So down the left-hand side in yellow, I've got the document numbers. in the middle, I've got where they were found. And then on the end, I've got the dates. And the dates do actually go in chronological order. So, and this is spoiler city now, right? So the book ends with the house, this hoarder's house gets demolished. It's a fire hazard. He's been warned by the council, and it gets demolished, the house. And this room, I tell you what, this reminded me of The Bloody Destructors, which is an absolutely amazing Graham Greene short story. If you've not read that, I'll see if I can find it online. And if I can find it online, I'll drop the link in the down there for you, because it's a really cracking good short story. But yeah, so this family, they're brickies. Craig Jordan Baker uses the brick, as a metaphor for, the foundations of a family, the foundations of, relationships. He's playing around with things like that. And so it's interesting how, this one's called brick dust, because it's like, well, you can have strong foundations, you can build something, but it's not going to last in the same way that these documents, documents are not made to last, are they? Paper documents. And we'll come back to that in a minute, because I think there's something very interesting that's done about that. And he, I love how as well, you get these little, instead of having like you usually get a star, don't you? Whether the chapter break, and you sometimes get a star. I know it's got a name for it, I can't remember what they're called now, but he uses like little bricks. So, he's playing around with that whole thing of, the idea of construct, the idea of the truth being a construct, I think, is a big thing as well with this unreliable narrator, right? So you've got kind of all of that going on. But in the center of it, and I think this is so clever, in the center is where where the narrator kind of divulges, what his role is and how he's been archiving and all of this stuff. And he tells you about these business, somebody was collecting, I can't remember which character it is now, had collected reams and reams, like, what are those? Lever arch files, loads and loads of lever arch files of business cards. And that's one of the things that he's got hoarded away. So yeah, but in the end, it's the demolition crew come in. And so, yeah, it does have a very kind of, tragic kind of ending, tragic kind of ending. But yeah, so I've done for you, the document number, and then where the document was found in the house, because this has obviously all come to light, at the end kind of thing. And then the date, and then you've got the underneath is what the document actually is. So, and again, I'll see if I can find some way of like share. Maybe I'll do a social media post and I'll just share it on there. Maybe I'll do that. Yeah. I'll put it on Substack, Instagram or something. Because you can't really, obviously you can't read it, can you, like that? So that was that. And I found that quite satisfying doing that. Again, my autistic brain. But right now, this is where I need help. Right. So, because this is doing my head in at the minute. So when I looked at the archives have, let me show you one. They're numbered, but they're not just, numbered in a bog standard kind of way. I mean, like this, look, they have like a little hashtag and a number. So that one is archive 3 and it has 04 21 102. Now, I think the first one sounds like a date. So when I looked at the first, there it is. There's the first one. Look, the first one looks like a date, right? 050346. When I read that, I thought, oh, that's a date, right? Upper Siston. I had no clue what Upper Siston meant when I started reading. I didn't know it was a room in the house. I thought it was a place. I thought Upper Siston was a place, right? So it took me a while to figure out that these things were actual, places in a house. But straight away, I could see there was a problem with me thinking this is a date, because you've got 46 there, but then it is a letter, and the letter is dated, and it's dated 1963, right? So they don't tally anyway. But then when you start going through these numbers, this number system, right? So it goes like this: document 1, 050346. So that's the one that does kind of work like a date, right? But then it goes document 2, 01 12 321. Document 3, 04 21 102. Document 4, 04 29 017. Document 5, 07 01 053. Document 6, 03 10 101. Document 7, 06 04 246. Document 8, 03 11 087. And document 9, I love this, look, document 9 has actually just got, it's a partial number. It's got 01 and then it's got XXXXX. And I'm guessing Is that because this document has got destroyed in the demolition? That's the way I've kind of read it, but I don't know. So now I am trying to figure out what this system is. I'm like, what on earth is going on here? I think it is probably just random. I think I'm overthinking it. Somebody put me out of my misery, please, if somebody knows. Great book. I love the structure. I love that whole kind of ergodic thing. But it's not just being clever for cleverness' sake. Like I say, there is a purpose behind it, which is that, we never can fully know, a person, let alone a whole family. So loved the book, absolutely loved it. It did live up to my expectations. If you've not read either of them, then absolutely go and check out the Niculians first. But I absolutely would recommend this. I think it is as good. It's a very different book. I would say that it is a very different book, but I think it is as good, equally as good. Oh, right. Regulars to the channel, if there are any. I don't know if I have any regular viewers, but if I do, you may have noticed, I've got a banner now at the top of the channel, and I have renamed again. I've gone Box Room Books now. So Rare Reads is gone. I've done another rebrand. That's it now. I'm not messing around with it anymore. I'm quite happy with the way it looks now. I'm happy with the banner, happy with my logo, happy with the name. I think it all works, and it works well with kind of my other socials and things. So that's the new us, Box Room Books. And another thing to just say just before I go, so I will be in 2 days' time interviewing Drew Gummerson. We've not had any questions come in for Drew for the interview. So if you've got any questions for Drew, if you are a Drew fan, just pop your questions in the comments, and I will do my very best to get them answered for you on Saturday. And watch out for some Drew video content coming in the not too distant future. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Take care and keep reading. See you next time.